It was a small mercy in a sea of devastation. Once I knew my immediate family was okay, my thoughts turned to others. I asked Maggie about various friends and neighbors, then, naturally, I inquired about Tom. "And Mr. Tom?" I asked, expecting reassurance. "Is he all right? Did he get out okay?" There was a strange pause on the other end of the line, a hesitation that made my stomach clench. Maggie's voice, when she finally spoke, was heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't just sadness about the storm, it was something more. "Oh my God," she said slowly, her words careful. "You didn't hear about Mr. Tom?" My body tensed instantly. My mind raced through a dozen terrible scenarios. Had he been trapped in the flood? Had something happened during an evacuation? "No," I managed to reply, my voice strained. "What happened? Is he okay?" What she said next didn't come as a sudden shock. Instead, the information settled over me slowly, piece by piece, like a layer of cold, suffocating slime. It was the beginning of a truth I was not prepared to hear. Maggie explained the situation at the friend's house. It was crowded. There were a dozen other people seeking refuge there. All of them were in the same desperate situation. They had lost homes or were cut off from them by the floodwaters. Among this group of displaced souls was an elderly woman. Maggie told me this woman was Tom's older sister. She would have been in her 80s at the time. Maggie knew of her by name and reputation through Tom, but they had never actually met in person until that chaotic day. In the midst of the shared anxiety and uncertainty, Maggie introduced herself properly to Tom's sister. Trying to make conversation and genuinely concerned, Maggie asked after Tom. She mentioned how worried they all must be for him. Tom's sister listened quietly. Her expression was troubled. She confirmed she was indeed worried. She hadn't heard from Tom since the storm had hit. She didn't know where he was or if he was safe. The not knowing was a heavy burden, common to so many in those nightmarish days. Maggie, still believing the narrative we all knew, tried to offer some comfort. "Well, I wouldn't worry too much," Maggie said kindly to the sister. "I bet the government has a list of VIPs to check on. Mr. Tom is surely on that list. They'll make sure he's all right." She was thinking of his supposed rank, his connections, his vital role in national security. Surely a two-star general who had worked for Condoleezza Rice wouldn't be left stranded. It was a logical assumption based on everything Tom had told us. Tom's sister looked at Maggie then. There was a deep sadness in her eyes, a weariness that seemed to go beyond the immediate crisis of the hurricane. "Maggie," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "I don't know what Tom has told you all, but—" The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Maggie said she could feel a shift in the atmosphere. The sister took a breath as if steeling herself to dismantle a carefully constructed world. The words that came next would begin to unravel everything we thought we knew about the kind, heroic Mr. Tom. The truth, when it came from Tom's sister, was a blunt, devastating blow. Not a general. He had never been a general, not even for a day. Not a ranger. The stories of grueling training, of elite brotherhood, all fabricated. There was no Air Marshal Program leadership. No high-level restructuring of a vital government agency. No personal pinning ceremony by Colin Powell at the White House. No working on Condoleezza Rice's staff. The problem of terrorists bleeding out through the groin, the one my father had so earnestly tried to solve. That too was a fiction. A detail in an elaborate, invented life. My poor father had wasted his precious time on a phantom problem. Tom, his sister revealed, was in fact a penny ante lawyer. His life had been ordinary, perhaps even mundane. The grand military career, the tales of covert operations, the quiet heroism, it was all a charade. The sister explained that her own deceased husband had been the one with the distinguished military record. He was the Korea vet. He was the ranger. He had been a high-ranking officer, and had indeed been involved in intelligence work, the spook stuff Tom had claimed as his own. Tom had grown up admiring his brother-in-law. He idolized everything about the man's life of service and adventure. At some point, Tom's dreary, real-life lawyer job had faded from his own perception of reality. His fantasies, fueled by his admiration for his brother-in-law, began to replace his actual existence. He started living the life he wished he had. The truly sick and disturbing part of his deception, his sister continued, was about his family, his daughter, the beautiful equestrian whose photos adorned his apartment, the one who supposedly died tragically in Costa Rica. She was very much alive. His ex-wife, who he claimed had died of cancer, also alive. They had simply written him off years ago. His detachment from reality, his descent into his fabricated world, had become too much for them to bear. So, he had killed them off in his narrative. It was a chilling detail. It added a layer of profound psychological disturbance to the already shocking revelations. He presented himself as a grieving widower and father to elicit sympathy, to add depth to his tragic hero persona. Yet his sister added a poignant footnote. Despite everything, despite the years of estrangement and the pain he must have caused, his daughter still had the heart to take him in after Katrina destroyed his apartment building. We found that out later. Even in his lies, a sliver of complex human connection remained. As I listened to Maggie recount this conversation over the phone, I felt my face physically change. My girlfriend, who was with me, watched my expression collapse. Shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of nausea washed over me. When I finally hung up, I relayed the whole sordid story to her. She was equally devastated. She too had met Tom. She too had been charmed by his stories and his kindness. We sat in stunned silence for a long time, trying to process the enormity of the deception. So many memories, so many interactions were now cast in a disturbing new light. I had so many questions. My mind reeled. What if I had actually followed up on the air marshal job? What if I had shown up at some government office saying, "Hey, Mr. Tom sent me"? The potential embarrassment, the confusion, it was horrifying to contemplate. Then, some of the specific, clever details of his lies started to hit me. He always said he was only promoted to the general ranks after his official retirement. That would have been his ready answer as to why his name wouldn't appear on any active duty general officer biography lists on Army websites. He probably had a plausible security-related excuse for the air marshal program too, if pressed. It was like he was writing a screenplay. He was constantly coming up with plausible explanations for any potential kinks in his story. He was shoring up the plot holes in his character development. He had thought it all through meticulously. The Zippo lighter with the Ranger crest, a gift from a deceased daughter. The tragic stories of loss that made him seem so noble. The dress uniform at my father's scattering of ashes, the white gloves tossed into the Gulf, all of it, a performance, a masterful, heartbreaking performance. Maggie told me she ran into him a couple of months after Katrina. He was back in New Orleans, seemingly unfazed. He was all smiles and his usual charming self. Maggie, still reeling from what his sister had told her, confronted him directly. "Stop right there, Tom," she said. "I know. Your sister told me everything." His reaction wasn't shame or remorse. He just laughed. He actually laughed it off. "Oh, that old bat's crazy," he said dismissively. And that was it. That was the last any of us ever saw or heard of him. I've Googled his name over the years, but nothing significant ever comes up. He just vanished, leaving behind a wake of confusion and betrayal. The weight of Maggie's revelation was immense. It pressed down on me. It felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. My primary overwhelming thought was a strange kind of relief. I was just glad my father passed away not knowing the truth about Tom. He had cherished Tom's friendship so deeply in his final years. The discovery of such a profound betrayal would have absolutely crushed him. It would have added a layer of bitterness to his last memories. That, at least, he was spared. This thought was a small, cold comfort in the ensuing storm of emotions. Yet this relief was quickly followed by a profound sadness for him. My father, a man I respected for his intelligence and insight, had been played like a fool. He had invested trust and affection in a complete fabrication. It angered me to think of Tom's calculated deception. My dad deserved genuine friends, especially then. I also knew my father's temper. Had he discovered the truth while alive, he might have been more than just bereft. He might have sought Tom out. He might have, quite literally, tried to beat the shit out of him for the disrespect. Then there were the specific memories now tainted. The gloves Tom threw into the water at my father's ashes ceremony. That grand, solemn gesture. It had touched me so deeply at the time. Now it felt like part of an elaborate stage play. The uniform, the dignified sorrow. All of it was bullshit. A carefully crafted performance. But then I'd pause. His tears that day, were they also bullshit? I couldn't quite believe that. His voice had choked with genuine emotion. The grief in his eyes seemed too real to be faked. And the dinner he took my sister and me to, after the scattering of ashes. It was at one of New Orleans' finest, most expensive restaurants. He had been so gracious, so comforting. He had looked us in the eyes and promised he would always be there for us. "Anything you need, anytime," he had said. Those words now echoed with a hollow ring. Was that kindness also part of the act? Or was there a sliver of something genuine in the man, buried deep beneath the mountain of lies he had constructed around himself? The man we knew as Tom was a paradox. He was a master manipulator, a weaver of intricate falsehoods. Yet the kindness he showed us, the warmth he exuded, felt undeniably real. How could both be true? How could someone so dedicated to a lie also be capable of what seemed like genuine affection? This was the question that plagued me. It made processing the betrayal even more complicated. It wasn't as simple as hating a villain. He had, in his own strange way, been good to us. Our family memories were now irrevocably altered. Every anecdote involving Tom, every shared laugh, every piece of wisdom he imparted was suspect. My niece and nephew had adored him. Their cries of Mr. Tom, as they ran to greet him, that innocent joy was now overlaid with a sad irony. He had been a hero to them, a larger-than-life figure. Learning the truth about him, even indirectly, felt like stealing a piece of their childhood. The deception hadn't just affected the adults. Its tendrils reached everyone he had touched. My own interactions with him replayed in my mind. Those long talks by the pool, where I, a young Marine, hung on his every word. His stories of valor, his advice on leadership, his insights into a world I aspired to understand. All of it was built on a foundation of lies. The admiration I felt, the respect I held for him, now felt foolish. I had been so easily duped. He had seen my eagerness, my naive reverence, and he had played it perfectly. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The most difficult part was reconciling the two Toms. The kind, avuncular presence who lit a lady's cigarette and listened intently to our stories. And the Tom who meticulously crafted a false identity, who killed off his living family in his narrative. Were these two separate entities? Or were they intertwined aspects of a deeply fractured personality? He had managed to make us feel seen, cared for, even loved. That was the cruelest part of the magic trick he performed. The illusion of connection had been so powerful. Maggie's final encounter with Tom was telling. When she confronted him, months after Katrina,